You're listening to the Two Bucks Podcast, the podcast for outdoor entrepreneurs.
Little by little, I was getting the sense of my time isn't my time.
Just kept feeling this pull to the outdoors and wanting to do something in the outdoor space.
Welcome back to another Two Bucks Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Krebs. And real fast, before we kick this episode off, if you've been listening to the podcast, I'm going to ask you for a favor. If you wouldn't mind going out to whatever platform you listen to the podcast on and giving us a quick rating or a review, because it helps the podcast grow almost more than anything else, is just having those ratings and the reviews on whatever platform you listen to so we can help more outdoor entrepreneurs find success, start their dream, whatever it may be. We can help reach more people. So I appreciate it. Thank you for being here and listening. And let's kick today's episode off. We've got Jake and Trevor from Toulou Broadheads. I don't know which one. I think, Trevor, you reached out to me on Instagram, and we were going back and forth about the Broadheads. And you must have heard through our podcast that I'm a big fixed blade single bevel guy.
Yeah. A little bit. And I reach out to a lot of folks on Instagram. So if you've ever been hit up by somebody like me on Instagram, yeah, that was probably me. But saw you're into single bevel or fixed blade broadheads, and just couldn't help but reach out.
Yeah, so I'm excited because you guys started Toulou Broadheads. How long has it been, the journey? Maybe let's go all the way back to like the idea quick and give people a quick overview of like how you got the idea starting Toulou Broadheads company, and
Sure.
Then, what the Broadheads are, give them an overview of the product as well.
Awesome. So if we go back to the beginning of Toulou as a idea, so we're in Franklin, just south of Nashville, Tennessee. That's where our business is based out of. I'm a songwriter and a musician, and Trevor owns an HVAC company as well. Coming up to, the pandemic, my job basically became not a job anymore for a while because everything shut down. So there's no live music anywhere. I had a lot of time on my hands, and he was like, "Hey man, you want to come help me move some of these 5-ton units so I don't have to do it by myself?" So we just started having a lot of truck time, and at that point, like I had done like some shotgun, like bird hunting and stuff like that, but I wasn't super into hunting, and all Trevor talks about is hunting. So in that truck time, starting in 2020, he got me into bow hunting, and he's been hunting since he was 8 years old. But we started kicking around ideas, and he had already been on a fixed blade single bevel train because of a bad experience with
with an
mechanical.
elk. Yeah. Shooting mechanicals though.
Yeah. So that kind of put us in the, where we were in the truck, and all of a sudden we're like just talking about ideas because at that point too, it was really hard to get a good fixed blade broadhead, and to get one, that's not like 150 or 200 grains only.
Right.
They just weren't available. So we were scratching our own itch, just looking for something that we could, rely on, right? You want something that's not going to have any failure points, that flies great. So basically we're kicking around ideas about like, well, maybe this would work, maybe that would work. And then the Ashby report came out, and so I think we heard about it first on like the Meat Eater podcast or something like that, and they had him on. We just got real nerdy about it, and it's 30 years worth of data that I'm still like, I don't completely understand all of it, but we went through and basically took a lot of those principles and thought, well, okay, if we take some of these things a few steps further, what could we do with a fixed blade broadhead?
Yeah.
And so we landed on an idea, and I was like, man, I think that would work. And he's like, well, how the heck do you make that thing? I was like, I bet we could print resin ones out of a 3D printer and just see if they fly. And he's like, how much does that cost? So like a few days later, he had a 3D printer, and we taught ourselves how to use
Oh my gosh.
AutoCAD, and started making designs. And there's a graveyard of broadheads upstairs in the office that are, just like the trial and error of getting it perfect and getting it to fly right.
Wow. And so did either one of you have any type of like machining, metalworking experience?
No.
No.
I bet you do now.
We
got
learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some great help in that department. Some real good, knowledgeable people come in beside us, and that we've reached out to and talked to, learned a lot about.
So the idea kind of started through COVID, spending a lot of time together. When did you hit because I see your website. When did you hit go on the website? I always find that's like a moment where you're like at the computer and you're like, are we ready?
Yeah.
And you're like, yep. And you turn your password page off and your website is now live.
Mm-hmm.
And then you pull out your phone and you type in your URL and you're like, wait, why is it not there? And you're like, oh, it's got to take like 30 minutes to sequence and Google. But that moment, that's like a big, that's a big gate that you go through as a product company. When was that moment for you guys?
Yeah, so Jake's our IT department.
I do most of the. My wife owns a marketing consulting company.
I hate computers. Computers don't get along.
So I did all the website design and all that stuff, and making sure all our systems work and things like that. But we didn't put the site up until like October of 2023. So we had gone through all the process of design, patenting, and all those things, and kind of keeping everything close to the vest. And then after elk season last year, that's when we were like, okay, let's start putting them up, showing people, and we basically started collecting pre-orders.
Yeah, we were pre-selling at that time. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So
we didn't start shipping until April of this year, 2024. So
awesome.
There's some pre-sales going on, and we wound up refining like the finish and stuff on our final product, and that kind of held things up a little bit, but we wound up with a superior product because of that. And
we're basically of the mindset that if we have the ability or the opportunity to make a better broadhead for the people that are buying our products, we feel responsible to do that because we're selling a high-end thing that we're backing, standing behind it, so might as well try to make it as good as we possibly can.
Yeah. And it's funny that broadheads are like, it's like our version of calibers, right?
Yeah.
The rifle guys, and I rifle hunt, but I view my rifle as a tool, like a hammer. Like I don't really get bent out of shape on what brand my hammer is as long as it can hit nails. Right.
Right.
But some people really get into like, well, no, this caliber is better than that caliber, and these are the reasons why, and that one's not big enough for elk. And then the next guy's like, well, my mom shot an elk at 450 yards with that one, so I don't know. For us, it's broadheads. Everyone's got their opinion. It's a very personal and passionate thing on how to pick your broadhead, and I get it because I think it's probably the part of the hunt where you kind of point to if something doesn't go right, it's the broadhead's fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like if you're filming, if something doesn't go right, it's the camera guy's fault.
Yeah, every time it's the camera guys for sure.
And that's for lack of a better, I don't think that broadhead deserves all the credit. I don't think it deserves all the blame either, right? Like you hit it in the shoulder, man. Like no broadhead is going to perform to perfection on an elk shoulder.
Yeah. Unless
you're shooting a hand cannon. I mean, like you missed a little bit. And we all try to, you know what I mean? So you can't blame that on the broadhead. But now I'm switching to single bevel fixed blade because my, just in case. And I think it gets a little bit out of shape, but it is a big part of your setup.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, the number one thing that's going to kill any animal is accuracy, right? If you hit it in the right spot, you'll take it.
Yeah.
And I don't like how people think it's a trade-off between accuracy and penetration. I'm like, you got to tune your bow so your broadheads fly good. They'll all fly the same. Right? They will be repeatable.
To a certain point.
The broadheads, between broadheads, they should be repeatable. They might not fly like your fixed points. They might not fly like your target arrows. But a quality broadhead fixed or mechanical, should be repeatable. And so you just got to shoot them, and you got to know where that broadhead flies, right? But it's not a trade-off. You don't have to trade accuracy for penetration to shoot a fixed blade. And I just don't like when people try to make that argument, like, well, I shoot, rage on elk because I prefer accuracy. It's like, well, I prefer accuracy too. That's like a non-starter.
Right. Yeah, that's why I practice a lot and tune my bow.
Yeah. So with fixed blade broadheads, there can be things that help your accuracy be more forgiving.
Right.
And that's one of the things this design that we come up with does by creating rotation.
Yeah.
You've seen the twist in the heads. There creates rotation, offers more forgiveness. Even if you, in all of our testing, all of our experience, like even if it's coming off of a bow that's not perfectly tuned, these can still fly extremely well with your field points.
Yeah. When you messaged me like, yeah, we make a broadhead with a twist, and I'm like,
yeah,
how do you put a twist on a broadhead? Like, they've tried every single gimmick out there. And then I'm like, oh, he meant literally. Like, there is a small twist in it to make it spin. I'm like, gotcha. Exactly. I thought you're like, yeah, we're doing like I don't know, there's I think it's
there's
like
a little
havoc.
wordplay in that, but
like,
it's definitely a literal twist also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, they've tried a lot of things. I don't know what else there is to try. They've tried cutting holes. They've tried doing all kinds of things. Yeah. The serrated broadheads ones are the ones that really just make me wonder who designed them. When there's big,
like serrated blades,
like big, but I'm talking like tree saw size serrations. Like there's just cutouts. I'm like, who designed that? There's no physics out there that is telling me that that's gonna cause more hemorrhage and not like ultimately kill your momentum and your penetration.
Right.
Like it's the same overall shape. So I don't think you're gonna cut anything different. Maybe you might make it, an ugly cut, but it's only gonna go in a third of the distance. And so you're
also making it incredibly hard to resharpen and reuse.
Oh yeah. I think after checking out your guys' page, now Instagram thinks I'm in the market for broadheads. And so they're sending me every broadhead company. I'm like, is this like some Temu broadhead company? Because it's like, I would never shoot this. I wouldn't even use this for small game. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So you went through the design. You mentioned the boneyard or the graveyard of broadheads. How did you, without giving away the secrets to the farm, how did you land on a shape? Because if you gave me a pencil and a piece of paper and said, hey, we'll make any broadhead you draw, if we can. I don't know where I would start, but I think if you asked 100 people that question, you'd probably come up with 104 broadheads because 4 of them would have scratched out the first one and redid it.
Right.
Yeah. The shape, we kind of based it on what's the name of the arrowhead? It's found in Northwest.
Oh yeah, so it's like a middle woodland period Native American broadhead. So like this is a shape,
just a traditional broadhead shape.
Yeah. So the profile of our broadhead, which is like part of our logo, is just a shape that's like it's hard to beat something that Native Americans were putting through bison for thousands of years. So what you lose with that, right, is long range accuracy, and so it's not that you are inaccurate. Because out to a certain point, you're going to be able to, make them fly right. But then eventually, the biggest complaint about fixed blades is outside of like 40 or 50 yards, they start planing. And so our design really was like, well, let's keep the shape that's made for penetration, right? Like Native Americans have been using to pass through buffalo for thousands of years. And then let's add something to that makes it more lethal. And that biggest thing that we could do, right? Because the 2 things we were after the most with our design were accuracy and penetration. We wanted something that was going to hit where you point your arrow at, and it's going to pass through an animal most of the time. Unless we've only had one animal we've shot that it didn't pass through, and it was because that buck got spined. So it went through like 3 or 4 vertebrae and another about.
Summer is finally here, which means hunting season is also going to be here before we know it. So now is the perfect time to be trimming lanes, planting food plots, and putting up some new stands so you're ready when those big bucks start cruising this fall. And if you've been thinking about putting up a new stand on your property, I can tell you it has never been easier with the combination of Maverick hunting blinds and their all-new Elevate platforms. I've got both on my property, and one of my favorite things about the Booner panel blind and the Elevate platform is how easy it is to set them up. Building a deer stand used to be a multiple weekend project for me before, but now with this Booner panel blind and Elevate platform, I can have a new stand up in just one day. I can even get these into every part of my property because they're super light and easy to assemble, yet rock solid when you're on top of that platform. Make sure you roll into this fall confident and ready for those big bucks because you know you got your stand set up and ready to rock well before season even started. Head over to maverickhunting.com to check out all the options and see why I'm such a huge fan of hunting out of these Maverick platform blinds. And when you check out using the code WesternRookie, you're going to save 10% on your entire purchase.
6 to 8 inches out into the right lawn on the other side.
Okay.
So with that, the twist that we have in the design is actually like a form of intrinsic rifling for the arrow.
Yeah.
And what it does is it transfers the moment of force from the back of the arrow where it normally is, where people put their offset and their fletchings, and that's where the stabilization comes from.
Yeah.
Well, if that's where your torque is, all the tight spin is in the back, and then the front of your arrow walks around, right?
Yeah.
If your moment of force is in the front of your arrow, though, and that's where the torque is, that's where your tight spin is, and then the back just acts like a stabilizer, and it always follows the tip. So we're taking these things out to 100 yards and grouping them with field points.
Wow. That's incredible. I can't even group my field points that well at 100 yards, if I'm being honest.
Well, he's our shooter. I can't do what he can do at 100 yards. But
I used to shoot 100 a lot because I had a great range with bales out to 100, and then I could back up. And they had oh man, this is going to make you jealous. This range had 0 or 10 to 100 yards with like cement, picnic tables, bow hangers, like your normal range, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to go shoot the 100, you walk all the way to the right. You want to shoot 10, you walk all the way to the left. But every interval in between. So there's I think there was 14 bales because there was 220s, 230s, 240s, 250s, and then 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Well, then they had 30 3D targets through a walkthrough course.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had another 30 bales through a walkthrough course.
Nice.
And this is all in one compound. There's a high fence around it just to keep out the public, and you got to pay to play. And it wasn't that much. It was $150 a year. But if you wanted to shoot farther, you just go to the back corner and find an open bale and just walk back however far you want, and you're shooting by yourself. And I was just walking back because I shoot a 3-pin slider now. And so my top pin, I think a lot of people make their bottom pin their slider, but for me, my top pin is my slider. And so when I dialed that down to 100, my bottom pin was 117. And I was just arcing arrows over them. I mean, it looked like I was out of this Pirates of the Caribbean with some flaming arrow. And I really liked shooting that. But now, I can get 100. I can get 100 here at the farm, but I only have a Reinhardt 18-1. And I'm like, these suckers are too expensive to be tossing them into trees. And, you're going to miss. You're going to mess up. That's why you do it, because then you're like, oh, I see what I did there. I flinched, I did this, I did that, and it really, it magnifies your errors that you're never going to notice at 20 yards. You're going to be like, 12 rigged them again. Everything's good.
It keeps you dialed in. Helps you aim a lot harder. You got to be on your game when you're shooting out 100 yards. And then your front hand torque, you put any torque on it, you're gone. So it just trains your body to not make those little mistakes when you're shooting closer. So
and at 100 yards, if you hold your tongue wrong, you'll shoot 6 inches to the right. So
and this is a free tip for the listeners. I used to go out and shoot my first arrow, cold, first day, first shot, always 100 yards, or the farthest target I could, because it's the only way you can really kind of replicate that feeling of oh man, don't F this up. When it's not going to be the same as an animal, but it's closer. And the smaller your target is at 100 yards, the more you're kind of in your mind, getting a little anxious. And that's how I kind of simulated that real world shooting experience.
Yeah.
So if anyone's out there, it's like, man, I have a hard time when like I can shoot all summer long, but when that deer walks out, I'm a nervous wreck. Like, well, start putting yourself into situations like that all summer long. Like go shoot, take a small target out to 60 and try to shoot it cold.
Yeah, and do it with some expensive arrows.
Yeah.
So that way.
Yeah, tape your iPhone to the target. Right. So yeah, no, that's a good one. Wow, that's 100 yards. One of the things so we had Kyle Davidson on the podcast. I'm not sure if you know Kyle. He's an R&D engineer by trade, and he's really big into fletchings and custom arrow building, and he's using all of his engineering knowledge and tools to do like high fidelity simulations. And he has acronyms and words, but basically he's looking at the aerodynamics of his vanes. And he's built a bunch of custom vanes, and he's built them in a way like that's the perfect amount of vane to stabilize your arrow, but it's not extra. It's like this much better than a blazer, and and it turns, and he's really dialed in. I mean, he's really got these vanes to a point where it's incredible. And he's showing me wind tunnel maps, and he's looking at the efficiency. He's like, if you can hear an arrow, that's inefficiency. That's how sound is created, right? Through vibrations, that excess vibrations. He's like, that's what I'm minimizing. So when you shoot my arrows, you can't hear anything because there is no waste of airflow coming off of that fletching. And I'm like, when you guys are talking about the twist in your broadheads, I was like, man, what if you could like tune the two components so they have the exact same twist rate? Right? Then would you just, now are we like going next level? Like you talked about like when you can drive from the front, it makes sense, right? When you're steering from the front, you're more accurate versus steering from the back. If you could steer, if both of them are in sync, would that take it up another level? And now it's like you shoot like just better than field points, because the field point can't steer from the front either.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some validity, like, so we always recommend to people when we get the question a lot, like, hey, can I shoot these with straight fletchings? Or we've even had people actually come to us after and be like, hey, I threw these on I got the right rotation ones and I put them on left fletch arrows. And the broadhead overcomes the fletchings.
Well, in like our wind tunnel testing, it'll depend on the size of your fletchings and
all those things. Yeah. So, but when you're rotating from the front, what you're doing is you're negating some of the things that like are so consequential that happen in the back. When that's all that's rotating and stabilizing your arrow, then you got to spend a lot of time getting those things perfect.
Yeah.
But when your broadhead's spinning from the front, then your fletchings become
a sail.
They're not rudders anymore that are steering your arrow from the back like a boat.
Yeah.
They're just like a fin that's stabilizing from the back. So wherever those things are, I will say that it would make you be even more dialed in if you had them spinning the exact rate. But we haven't noticed any difference between shooting like three vein helical or 4 vein helical. We've even tried 2 vein helicals, which are less stable.
1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree to the right. As long as you're matching the same bevel, the same twist as your heads, the accuracy's there every time.
As long as they're turning in the same direction, you're basically shooting bullets.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, that sounds super excited. We talked about trying out the 100 grain because that's what I shoot. All my whitetails, I shoot 100 grain, and I shoot, I would say a majority 100 grain tips. 3D season, I'm doing 100 grain. All whitetail season, it's like 1 week of hunting a year, and like leading up to that hunt, I switched to 200 grains for elk. But I have a big bow. I'm shooting 72 pounds, 30-inch draw. I'm already at 500 grain arrow. For elk, I jump up to like 600 grain. It's like 599.5. So it's a big arrow. And so that's where I'm like, I think I can handle this, but I want, that penetration. I want a heavy arrow. I want a lot of momentum. I'm probably sacrificing a little bit of kinetic energy to gain a little bit of momentum based on the calculators. I don't have a chrono, but but I think it's going to, it definitely noticeable when I put that 200 grain arrow on and shoot the same target, like a fresh face, it's 2-3 inches farther in than the 100 grain tip. So it makes a big difference. I'm like, for elk, I think that 200 grain is nice. I just don't like putting up with it all year long.
Sure.
And with that penetration, you're going to wind up getting 2 holes instead of 1 hole, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what we shoot for. I'd rather have 2 1-inch holes than 1 2-inch hole any day of the week. So,
Well, what I want is the next step. I want 2 empty holes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
2 holes are great, but if your arrow's
Yeah.
in them, then it's like no holes.
No, we want to go clear through, pass
Yeah.
through.
Which is part of the reason we made it out of the stuff we made it. Like our broadheads are made to hit the dirt. So we were like, well, we better make sure they survive hitting the dirt on the other side.
Yeah. Is there, so then that gets kind of just in the materials of the metal that you pick, right? Just like here's a level where it's hard, but we can still sharpen it. Because if you get too hard, it's really hard to sharpen. Once it's sharp, it stays forever. But if it's soft, you can get a temporary edge on it, but then it's going to just, deform and bend and do all kinds of things when you hit something. And I've had both. I've had some broadheads where it's like, ew, I think I could shoot another whitetail with this thing, but I'm not. This is not an elk broadhead anymore.
Yeah. So we did it with metal and we did it with the finish. So the metal that we use is S7 tool steel.
Okay.
There, and it's hardened to about 52 Rockwell, and then we coat it in a product called Tacti-Black, which is an electroless nickel alloy that permeates into the substructure of the metal. There, and it completely coats it. It increases the Rockwell hardness of the surface of the material about 3 to 4 Rockwell. So we're looking at about 55 to 56 Rockwell finished product.
For reference, what would your cheap generic brand, broadhead what would they maybe be at?
Depends on what it's made out of. There's like stainless steel ones are going to be softer. Like, so people think, oh, I can get them sharper, right? They like stainless steel because it's easy to sharpen because it's soft.
Yeah.
But the edge rolls on them, and so in broadheads, the magic number is somewhere between like 55 and 60 Rockwell.
Okay.
That gives you the resilience that you need to keep an edge, but still be easy to sharpen.
Yeah.
And also the resilience to, like, whenever you're not so hard that it's brittle, because when metal gets super hard, that's when it starts to shatter on the other side of something, or if it runs into something, you start getting a lot of chatter on the edges of your blades and things like that if it's too hard.
Interesting.
And anything that winds up breaking on your broadhead going through a critter, you're losing all that momentum, all that energy that was put into that arrow. If there's any failure point at all, if you have a screw break in it, if you bend it over, if you break it,
even
you just lost all that
mechanical
momentum.
Blades opening up steals momentum from your arrow going into an animal.
Yeah, that's why I shoot momentum. I have been shooting mechanicals for whitetails, and but I shoot a pretty powerful bow. I mean, it's older. It's not quite as good as some of the new ones, but I bought this in 2016. It's a Matthews Halon. It's shooting 345 IBO, right? They haven't really done much to change that in the last 10 years, right? Bows have kind of hit their, I think, technology levels, and now it's really getting like fine tuning. It seems like you can get exactly the right setup for you.
That and weight, I think they're
they're
creative ways to make a 4-pound bow. That even the newer Matthews lifts that are some limb stuff they're working through, but just having a bow that's not the extra 2 pounds walking around in the woods, if you're putting on 12, 15 miles a day out west, makes a difference.
Yeah, my bow's like 8.5 pounds finished, so I'm out of the running anyway. But yeah, so I shoot.
But it's stable. It's stable when you
I have a front bar and a back bar. I really like it. And so that's why I'm shooting mechanicals for whitetails. Like I'm gonna punch through either way. I like that. Our whitetails at our farm are very jumpy, and I'm just starting to. The last year I really took a deep dive and realized I need to be shooting them with their head up. There's a lot of them. I was shooting them. They're like head down in a food plot, 15 yards. I'm like, perfect. She has no idea I'm here. Whack. And then she drops 6-8 inches, and my shot doesn't even land close. And then it's like, how do you predict that at 15 yards? Because if I aim where she ended up, I'm going to miss.
Yeah.
And it's 15 yards. Like, how can she react that fast? And it's that leverage that she gets by raising her head as she's strapping her shoulders.
And rolling away.
And so now I'm switching, and I'm switching to shooting them with their head up. using that mechanical for a little bit more forgiveness on like if I'm off an inch or two. If I hit liver with a small broadhead, all I get is liver. If I hit a little bit of liver with a big broadhead, now I might nick a lung, and that just things like that change what's going on, especially since these deer are dropping so fast. And I've never, except for a bad shot, I've never had a mechanical blade not pass all the way through with my setup. And I want to go to 80 pounds. I really do. I want to go to a 31-inch 80-pound bow because I'm 30 and a half is my arm span.
Okay.
And I shoot Matthews, which is like a little shorter. I want to switch to Hoyt, which is a little longer, get to like a 31, 80, 82-pound bow, and then really send some stuff through animals.
Yeah, we'll pick up a little more speed too. If you're, at a draw length like that with 80 pounds, you're going to be
Cruising.
You're going to be up there.
Those things that's going to heat up the air around that arrow.
Yeah. Well, it's the basic math there. It is like F equals ma, right? That's the simple physics equation. Like force equals mass times acceleration. So however you get there, whether you're adding acceleration by increasing the poundage of your bow, or you're adding mass to your arrow, and obviously it's more complicated than that depending on like where the mass is in your arrow. There's a lot more science behind it, but the big debate between speed, kinetic energy, and momentum are like if you took two setups and you made them equal, right, where you have a heavier arrow and less speed, but that speed is made up for in a lighter arrow, like you actually will probably see about the same penetration. But when you start adding a lot more weight or a lot more speed, depending on what it is, that's where you really start seeing differences. So,
and it depends on what you impact. If you hit bone, go with you're gonna wish you had the weight behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not chasing speed. I'm not a speed demon. I don't care what the numbers are. I'm an engineer. I want the energy because that's really the only thing. It's all things equal, I just want more energy into my stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want my string to put more energy into my stick. I can choose for the application whether I want that to be speed or if I want that to be momentum. Like if I'm shooting tack, like some tack event with no rangefinder, especially, it's like I'm going to be putting that 80-pound bow on a 400 grain arrow so I can be off at a yard or two and not be super down in the bushes trying to find my arrows. Right.
No doubt.
But hunting, it's like, no, I want that momentum and I just want more energy, right? Like my 600 grain arrow behind 70 pounds in 30-inch draw, or my 600 grain arrow behind 82 pounds on a 31-inch draw. It's like, I'm going to pick that one.
Yeah.
It's just going to give me more. I want excess.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you want to be able to punch through because on the marginal shots, right? Like bone breaking ability, obviously our broadhead's like a maul. It pops bone open.
Yeah.
So it passes through. The thing that slows your arrow down once you hit bone really is the friction of the bone on the shaft of the arrow. So, if your arrow slows down a lot from the initial impact because it doesn't have the weight, and then that bone doesn't really open up all the way, then you're getting friction from the bone dragging against the shaft of the arrow and the fletchings as it's trying to pass through.
Yeah.
So having something that actually really twists, like our broadhead doesn't rely on the bevels in order to do that. The twist in the blade is actually what pops everything open. So
how does that? I wanted to ask about that on the twist in the broadhead. I get it completely, aerodynamics, right? But when you get into I don't know what the word is, but hydrodynamics for the soft tissue, but the solids, right? Do you think in your experience seeing that, and I'm sure you tested every other fixed blade broadhead on the market, does that twist in the broadhead shape besides the single bevel? I almost was like, I wonder if that helps or hurts. I don't understand the physics and the modeling as much, but I could see it going almost both ways. Like if you put too much spin on it, I could see that as once you hit that animal, now all of a sudden that's slowing you down. It can't spin that fast through an animal. And if you don't put any on it, imagine if you were a dual bevel, right? It's just going to try to go straight. I don't know if that's the best either, especially when you do hit that bone. Because if if you wedge straight into a bone, you're just going to stop. You have to crack it before the bone stops your momentum. Basically, is I think what you come down to. So, what are your thoughts on the broadhead twist as well as the single bevel? Are they the same angle? So it's kind of all in unison, or is the broadhead twist a little more aggressive than the single bevel angle?
The broadhead twist. So basically, where we landed, we tried a lot of different like variations of the twist.
Yeah.
And like doing more aggressive and doing less aggressive, and where we landed was the thing that flew the best.
Yeah. Okay.
And B had the most penetration. Like we said, going from the start, like we wanted accuracy and penetration. We want to pass through. We want to hit where we're aiming. So where we landed, it's complementary, and it does not. I guess the physics behind it, and we've talked to Trevor. Actually, had a long conversation with a guy who did like a whole study on the flight of arrows, and he's like a astrophysicist or something like that just has an interest in archery. But an arrow is essentially in flight until it stops, right? So whether it's flying through the air or it's flying through the animal, the only thing that changes, right? So the characteristics, whether you're talking about aerodynamics or fluid dynamics or whatever, it's the same properties. Right. It's just how dense is the material that the arrow is flying through, right? And so what you want is something that maintains its rotation and center no matter what it's flying through. Yeah. And so what we were going for was, a design that keeps your arrow rotating no matter what. So as that thing's moving through, it has to rotate, but it's not so aggressive that it gets bound up or, like a drill bit or something like that gets, caught up if you're like, trying to punch through hardwood and you get too much sawdust in there or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it kind of is that sweet spot then where it doesn't impede anything. It just adds to the rotation through the animal. And the way you explained it, I think kind of wrapped my mind around it. Like, yeah, that's right. Like if it wasn't flying, like it could still spin through the air, but if it wasn't efficient through the air, it's not going to be efficient through the animal. If it is efficient through the air, it should be efficient through the animal as well.
Correct.
One of the things, and I want to get your input on this, I think it's common for broadhead companies, and there's a new mechanical broadhead on the market that's getting a lot of social media traffic. I'm sure you guys know exactly what we're talking about and all the tests.
What you're talking about, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I understand. First of all, I know you. I know of you, and I know your tactics are clicks, right? Views, right? So I part of it's for that, right? Part of it's kind of the showmanship. You're trying to do a test, and I'm like, okay, well, that is not the same. Like, I think you're just trying to almost bait for your fish for comments, right? But I think it kind of highlights something that it is very hard to do authentic broadhead testing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that you can't, like, you can, even to me, like, you go to the meat locker and you're like, hey, can I shoot, through the ribs of your pork? It's like, if you find someone that lets you, great. But that's not the same. There's not a hide. There's not guts. There's not movement. That animal's not dropping or taking out. There's so many things that it's like so hard.
Even then, I listened to a conversation the other day, and somebody was saying, even like in the Ashby tests, it's still not a one-to-one. He would kill an animal with a rifle and then set it up and take as many shots as he could until rigger set up to actually get a real test. But even then, that animal isn't bearing weight. It's not standing. Its muscles aren't tensed. It's not like there's no. You can't get a perfect arrow test. You can do as good as you can.
I mean, he did a great job.
And he did a great job.
And he shot a lot of real animals with his bows too.
Real animals, yeah. So what he was doing was he was in Africa hunting big game, and then he would harvest something with a rifle, and then set it up, and he would take about however many 30, 40, 50 shots before it started to rigger, basically, so that he could get an accurate, like, this is actually punching through hide and bite holes and everything else, and you could measure, how far something's actually penetrating.
Yeah, but I thought he also shot a lot of animals in other countries, like in a hunting scenario. Like he shot shot was with the bow too, and he's like, it seems like you're right. Like, and even then, you can't replicate the exact same shot, flight path, impact, the constituents of the animal that you went through. Did you go through a river? Did you not? There's so many variables where it's hard to test.
Yeah.
The only thing I was thinking of as we talked that could work is, go down south and hunt hogs and because they're an invasive species, farmers want them gone. You hunt them anyway. There's unlimited bag seasons. They're a very dense animal, and I think you could start to, if you got enough reps in, you could start to like, you should take a shot, document the arrow path. Like if you got to pass through, maybe find like a dowel, small dowel, and like put it and say like, okay, here's the angle it went through. You can see the both ends. Take some notes, and you can kind of start to build up and say like, we tested a bunch of broadheads, we tested a bunch of mechanicals, we tested ours. Tested some fixed blades. Like we are seeing that this, time and time again, on average, has like 47% more penetration and like a 75% chance of a pass through. Like in the 25%, all of them hit a major bone, right? And I think that would be about the only way I could really see it. Because you're not going to go to Africa. They're not going to let you shoot water buffalo after water buffalo testing this out, right? Unless you have unlimited money. Which most of us in the real world don't.
Hogs are probably the best thing, and even then, hogs are a different scenario than hunting whitetail or elk or anything like that. And when you're looking at pass-throughs in an animal that's got legs that are this long versus an animal that, his shoulder stands as high as your head does.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of differences. So it's.
Have you been able to think of any ways to really get, because you'll get customer feedback from your highly engaged customers either way. Like when I get the 100 grains, I shoot a whitetail, like I'm going to give you guys a full breakdown, like lab analysis of what happened.
Yeah. We love that. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody that purchases one, I'm like, all right, send us pictures.
Send us pictures, tell us how it went.
We got them rolling in now, and
that's what I was wondering. Like, can you get that? Like, find a way. Like, we'll give you a sticker or something if you send us like what happened.
Yeah.
And then you could be like, all right, well, we've had 452 elk with our broadheads, and we've had 451 pass-throughs. And the guy that didn't get a pass-through, he's like, I shot him in the shoulder, broke the shoulder, got the elk, but I didn't get a pass-through. And you're like, okay, well, understandable.
You got time to make some more spreadsheets for us?
I always have time for more spreadsheets.
Well, I'll test, and you can spreadsheet.
That's
I'm
awesome.
gonna test too.
Yeah. You both want to be on the testing part.
Yeah.
Of
course.
Yeah, that's awesome. How has it gone? The kind of flipping gears. We talked really a lot about the technical aspects of the broadheads and kind of what you did to design it, build it. I got to imagine you're entering a very mature, highly competitive market, right? How has it gone with like sharing the broadhead, getting traction? What things have you found that have worked? What things have you were like, man, we thought this was going to be the way we went, and it just seemed like closed door after closed door, so we pivoted and we started marketing in a different direction. I know, Jake, you mentioned your wife has got a career in marketing, so I'm sure that's been a huge asset. But like, how's it gone entering? It doesn't have to be the broadhead market specifically, just a mature competitive market. There's a lot of things out there already. A lot of people probably already have their favorite widget in this demographic, and you're trying to break that.
Yeah, so there's tons of broadhead companies out there.
Yeah.
So trying to break into the market and get seen. Like early on, I've obviously been reaching out to people on Instagram like crazy. It's a great marketplace to reach out to.
Yeah, we take a relational approach with most things. So like, we've done everything. We were at a TAC event, selling them in person, and we did, ATA, NWTF, in-person events. And then, so we're kind of trying everything. And like, first and foremost, the archery industry in general, or hunting industry, is full of really, really good people. And like, so God has opened a lot of doors for us, and people have been way kinder to us than they have any reason to be, which is awesome, right? And so everywhere we go, we show people, we get a lot of comments, even from people who are like, hey, I'm a mechanical guy, but like, I just want to say, like, good job on actually innovating and not just coming out with another flat piece of steel like everybody else and saying it flies like field points. So, for us, from a marketing standpoint, like, we've had some things early on happen that are really cool and help with our credibility.
Yeah.
Somehow, Cam Haynes found our broadheads, and like, we've never talked to him, but he got them, and he made 3 videos using them. and tagged us in one of them, which is crazy, right?
So
for
he
us,
just ordered them? Like
No,
all of a
no.
sudden you're shipping orders, and all of a sudden Cam Haynes comes through, and you're like,
he
no
didn't,
way.
He didn't order them. He didn't order them. I say he either got them from. I bet he either got them
From the bow rack?
Archery Country.
Archery Country,
out in
or in Austin. They're carrying our heads down there. And then, or there's another guy that we met with here who was actually, he owns a company in our area, and just through friend of a friend, he's like, hey, yeah, come on and sit down with me. And we had about an hour-long lunch meeting with him one day. And he got us really, like, asked us a lot of really good questions, because he's got a big product company. And so he asked us a lot of questions we didn't know answers to. And then, he started his career, actually, the reason he invented his products was because he was a guide up in Alaska, guiding like spring bear and, moose and stuff like that. So he would, he was basically like, these are really cool. When you have a finished product, like, send me some, and I'll send them out to some folks I know in the industry. So it could have been him, could have been Archery Country, wherever he got them. We don't know, but we're sure glad that he did.
Yeah. I hope he shoots something with one of them. I mean, it sounded like he was doing like targets and like review, like, hey, check out this new broadhead. Yeah. But yeah, imagine if he shows like a 400-inch bull off of the whatever ranch he hunts, the Tajon Ranch.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping he's curious to see what kind of wound channel these twisted blades will put in the critter.
Right.
There's a lot of talk on that, and I don't know. I don't think it's been explained, or I've heard it be explained in a way that I'm like, okay, I understand what's going on. I can get on board with the math and the physics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everyone's just like, yeah, when you twist them, they cut. It's a bigger wound channel. And I'm like, what?
It's not a bigger wound channel.
Yeah, what instinctively changes about
So
being
what happens
twisted?
is, imagine your wound channel like say like a phone charging cord. Right?
Yeah.
You have your iPhone cord, and that thing's perfectly straight, right? And then you have your iPhone cord that is like a coiled cord, right?
Yeah.
That stretches. So if you have two of those that are the same absolute or length in general, but then you take that stretchy one and you stretch it out,
Right.
you're creating that much more damage because your blades are spinning through that animal. So you are basically doing 3 or 4 times more damage than a broadhead that makes a straight wound.
Yeah, but okay, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second. So I have a right here, right?
Yeah.
So this is how I imagine it, right? Here's your double bevel, fixed blade, doesn't spin. Imagine your arrow has like perfectly straight flight, no fletchings, because they're all going to do a little bit. To me, it's like the difference between this and then if I just spin it and pull it tight and that. And that's, I'm like, they're the same. To me, it's the same length. I don't feel like you're doing this.
Yeah.
You have to think about it where the cutting edges are, right? So you have 2 cutting edges that are rotating around each other. So that edge is actually drawing a line around the center and not just twisting like real close to the center. So
it'd be like a piece of paper, right? Like a strap. Like you twisted a strap.
Yeah. So if you twisted a strap or you had anything like that and you twist it, it's not like 100 times more.
Yeah.
It's about 3 or 4 times more, though, depending on how much. So our broadheads and animals that we've done necropsies on, we're seeing about 180 degrees of rotation every 12 to 16 inches of penetration.
So in an elk, you're basically going through twice. You're going to spin it around a 1/4 rotation.
Yeah, 1/4 rotation, which compared to other flat single bevel broadheads, they're getting about 40 degrees of rotation.
That is interesting. I don't know. I'd have to spend some time with it because to me it seems like if you took that strap and you just went around one time. Yeah, I don't know. So I see what you're saying. Like if you were to then take a string and measure the path of one, but to me it's like, how is that different than if you straighten it out? Because it's still the same length of material.
Well, it's because you're actually cutting more inside of the animal, so your wound's not actually bigger.
Yeah.
Right? So that's like the math physics way of thinking.
It winds up being just a little bit longer.
Yeah, it winds up being longer, doing more damage as it rotates through the animal. But the other thing that it does is when you have an actual spiral wound channel.
Yeah.
So I worked in the medical field before I started doing songwriting stuff full time.
Okay.
And one way you think about a wound, right, is you have an incision or a laceration. A straight broadhead, like one that doesn't create a spiral like that is
Yeah.
creating a laceration. That laceration is perfectly straight, and so it has what we call secondary intention, which means that it can just close back up like a valve,
Okay.
right? When you have a twist, right? So our broadhead creates like a really exaggerated S curve, basically, when it goes through things. That laceration makes basically that wound can't come back together really easily because it's got basically two flaps in it.
Now that
So-
I'm on board with. That makes perfect sense
Right.
to me. Like you're
And
trying
so
to
when-
make like a hole.
Exactly. You want something that's not going to open
Yeah.
up. And the whole goal with an animal, right, is you're trying to do the opposite of what they do at a hospital. Hospitals are trying to close up wounds. We're
Yeah.
trying to create a sucking chest wound, right? And if possible, take off the top of the heart while we're at it, right?
Yeah. And I do believe, I mean, another thing that I do like about a spinning broadhead is your chances of hitting different things increases, right? I mean, if you
Right.
slip a two blade in, theoretically, if you slipped it in just right, you could almost probably slip it right between the liver and the lungs.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
miss stuff for sure.
If you're spinning, I mean, who knows what happens when that animal takes off, but there's a good chance you're going to hit more than one thing.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of that. And so I get on board with that for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've always wondered about is the bleeder blades versus the not bleeder blades. So I shoot a two blade single bevel now, or I have them for elk. I shot a whitetail doe with them, and I had it on camera. I filmed it. It was like that 13-yard shot. I looked at that shot and I'm like, that deer's done. Absolutely drilled that deer. I mean, deer ran 40 yards, went behind a willow branch from my tree stand and stopped. I'm like, this is over. Done deer. Like I'm 15 minutes, that deer's dead. Right? Arrows buried in the food plot. Got it on film. Reviewed the film, reviewed it multiple times. I'm like, yeah, that lighted knock, everything. This is
Right.
perfect. Well, then a coyote walks by, cuts the track. And I'm like, God damn. You know, because they can smell, you know, the coyotes can smell that wound, that gland in the deer's feet, and that's how they track. That's how they find every wounded animal. We've never had a problem with coyote eating a deer on our farm. This year we had that coyote cut the track. I tried to shoot the coyote. Coyote ducked my arrow at the last second. 40-yard shot, not under. I mean, I should have aimed underneath him. I should have known. I aimed at him. That coyote takes off. I'm like, wow, that was crazy. Like, I mean, this is all, like, I'm still got high adrenaline from shooting the deer, the doe, much less now the coyotes come through. Then, like 3 minutes later, a coyote from a different direction, like completely different, 180. Like, this coyote should be like 100 yards over there. This coyote came from 100 yards over here. So definitely a different coyote. Comes in, and I'm like, holy crap, there's another coyote. So now I'm trying to get another arrow. Now I'm starting to get out of arrows here, defending my deer. And that coyote sees me knock an arrow and squirts. Then, like 5 minutes later, two coyotes, I can see them both, come from that same direction. So it might have been one of the same ones, but
Right.
definitely not the first one circling all the way around.
Right.
Two coyotes come in, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I have never
Right.
seen a coyote on this farm that we know we have them. We've got pictures. I've never
Yeah.
seen one hunting. Now I've got four of them within 10
Right.
minutes.
Opportunistic little buggers, aren't they?
Well, there's no way they knew. They just coming through.
Right.
Well, I'm like, okay, there's coyotes everywhere. I've got a wounded deer. That one coyote knows there's a wounded deer, so he's coming back. He just got scared off, but he's coming back. So I'm like, I got to get my deer. Like, I'm not worried personally. Like, if I'm around, they're going to buzz off. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to drag my deer to the edge of the food plot, gut it, go get the four-wheeler, get out of here. I was a little bit worried about going to get the four-wheeler. I'm like, that time I might have to scare one off, but I should be fine. Like, they might get a couple bites in, but I'll get most of my meat. Go find my arrow, and I pull it out, and I'm like, that's not as red as I was hoping for. And then I smell it, and I'm like, well, it doesn't really smell like guts, but it's not coated, right? I would have expected it to be nice, pink, bubbly blood. I thought I hit a lung, double lung. Right? And so now I'm like, well, do I leave? Like, I'm not sure. And I've been a preacher of when in doubt, back out. It's been my life motto. Come to ball. Everyone that's like, hey, what do you think about the shot? And I'm like, if you're asking me, you should wait till morning. Like, that's kind of my criteria. If you ask me about a shot, you should wait till morning. If you want to go in right away, you got to be like, that is slam dunk. I don't need any second opinions. And that's what I thought. Well, then I started sending the video to everyone, and they're all like, yeah, that deer's dead. And I did deer track, everything. But I'm like, man, I don't want to lose the deer. So I'm gonna try to wait. I'm going to try to wait, see what happens. I think we came back early the next morning, found where the deer stopped, puddle of blood, and then just nonstop drops for 400 yards, light drops, not even a lot of blood, and coyote, scat, and tracks, fresh coyote sign on that trail. And so those coyotes, I think, found her and ran her off. But to my point, I was like, I thought I drilled this animal. The arrow went in, drilled it. Everyone looked at the film, drilled it. And that deer wasn't dead. Like, the coyotes might have gotten her, but they shouldn't have been able to chase her 400 yards with that shot. And so I started really looking at what could have gone on, and I'm like, I think my broadhead that I'm shooting is just too narrow. I just don't think it has enough. And I missed, right? Something didn't work. I didn't cut the top of its heart off, like you said, Jake, clearly, because the deer didn't die.
Right.
But I'm like, that shot with the 2.5-inch mechanical, I think would have. So I just think my broadhead that I was using is just a little bit too much on the penetration side than the laceration side or the incision side, like not enough cut. How do you balance that? And one of the things somebody said is like, hey, I tried that same broadhead, someone that shoots a different fixed blade single bevel, and they're like, hey, I tried that one too. Also did not like that aspect of it. I switched to this one because it has a bleeder blade. So
Sure.
How did you kind of wrap your head around, do we do bleeder blades? Do we not? Obviously, bigger cut, a little bit worse on the penetration. How do you balance that?
Yeah, so we'll definitely be coming out with the bleeder blade.
Okay.
A lot of people like them, so
we-
it's partly just to give the people what they want.
And I mean, for blood trails and like you say, like getting more stuff in there, like there's definitely some importance there. So yeah, like we said, we designed it for two things in mind: accuracy and penetration. And this is our flagship product right here that we came out with for that. As we grow, we got a bunch more designs. I got a bunch more plastic up there.
Plastic's
And,
cheap once you get the printer.
Yeah. So we've got all kinds of
Got a
designs
lot of
we're
things
coming out with next year.
I was cooking things up in the lab up there.
Always cooking things.
But from when we thought about this one, because we thought about bleeder blades and what that would look like, and we decided a few things were more important to us.
Yeah.
Right out of the thing. So accuracy and penetration, but also that solid fixed blade, like one of the
Single
reasons
piece construction.
single piece
yep.
construction is
Yeah.
a big deal.
I
'Cause
like
anything that's on there, right? If you have even a slotted in bleeder blade and your set screw or whatever you're using to hold that thing in place, if there's wiggle in it, like that's another failure point. Just if you're an engineer, right? So the more components there are to any system, the higher likelihood that you have the system breaking down at some point.
So
Right.
to put that in perspective, one of my products that I work on has so many
Yeah.
components, they've never built the same stack, the same bomb twice in hundreds of years of production.
Right.
Imagine trying to maintain that, like all of those
Right.
pieces. The only time they've ever sold two is when someone says, I'll take one. Actually, you know what? I'll take two. Just build them the exact same way.
Going the accent. Yeah.
Other than that, they've never built the same version twice. And I'm
Right.
like, that's a lot of components. That's a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
So that was something that was concerning to us, though, as we're going through. Like we want a solid construction, but on the other side of it, like sharpening it, taking care of it. If you build in bleeder blades into a solid construction broadhead, that thing gets a lot harder to sharpen. And like from an ease of use and tuning standpoint, it made more sense for this one. Also, the amount of rotation we're getting. We have everything we've shot has died in sight.
Yeah.
So
Well, now I'm really excited
obviously,
to try those suckers out because I've never had a whitetail or anything I shot with my bow die in sight.
no. So we've had multiple whitetail and elk. We left some with his buddy out where we go out west, and he sent us a video and a picture about 3 weeks later, and he was like, "Well, it ran 30 yards and it tipped over dead."
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
from
I do feel like what you're saying. I like everything. I like to me, I started with muzzies, like every little young lad does when they get their first eBay
Yep.
bow, and I don't know. A lot of people have muzzies. I think, and there's like 7 pieces to a muzzy. It's crazy. And so I was like, I don't like these. And so ever since then, I've been doing solid piece. The mechanicals, obviously they got a couple pieces, but I was a big fan of the NAP Hellraiser, and primarily because it was a single solid piece 3-blade. And then I switched to these newer 2-blade ones. I love the solid piece. So yeah, I get it. It's hard to manufacture a 4-blade solid piece. It's hard to sharpen. You'd almost probably have to come out with like your own sharpening tool. Like you'd have to design like, how are we going to sell like this $20 or $30 sharpener that helps people sharpen our broadheads, and maybe any broadhead at that point. But like,
sure,
because it's hard. You can't do it on a knife or a knife sharpener, like a work sharp. It, a single blade a tube bevel or a 2-blade single bevel, easy, right? It's just like a pocket knife. But anytime you add that third blade in, it's almost impossible to really
starts
sharpen.
Getting more and more difficult, which is, we're a little selfish, right? So we designed this thing because we're going to have to sharpen more of them than anybody else. So we were like, we better, if we don't want to sharpen it, nobody else is going to want to sharpen it. But it's because they're made to be used, for
you'd almost have to make like your own personal sharpener.
We have a jig we're working on that'll actually come out and
which could be huge. I've never seen one, and they might exist, but yeah, if you come out with the first like single bevel sharpener.
There's a guy who he's called I think
Innovative Outdoorsman.
He does these things called Stay Sharp guides or something like that. Or Stay Sharp. It's a really cool product. I bought one for whenever before we had these produced. I was shooting like just a regular flat single bevel broadhead, and like the ability to do it and keep the exact same bevel and just slide it back and forth and get that nice, even, take everything off exactly the same all the way across the bevel, and then, go all the way up to, stroking leather and get that mirrored finish. That's the biggest thing is, reproducibility, being able to do it, yourself. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I like it. I like that. What bothers me about almost all of the broadheads I've seen that are like a Ed Ashby style broadhead, but then with bleeders, it's almost like you took everything that Ed Ashby said and put it into your broadhead, and then you forgot it all for the bleeders.
Right.
And so I'm like, why don't we, like, if we're gonna have like a 3-to-1 broadhead angle, why don't we do that for the bleeder blades too? It seems like all of the bleeder blades are like straight wings coming out, right? They're dual bevel instead of a single. I'm like, if you have a single blade, why don't you have a single bevel bleeder blade? Like, why don't you have those help? Why do you have such a sharp, flat angle on your bleeder blades and a gradual angle on your broadhead? Like, why don't we have this all working together? It seems like you just like you threw in two drastically different concepts and threw them into one broadhead. I'm like, close, but not really what I meant.
Well, and that's
trying to check a box. With it. Yeah.
That's something we think about, and we get asked frequently by people is like, well,
one, it's not going to be 100 grains.
Yeah, it won't be 100 grains.
You're going to be adding a lot of weight to it. I mean, this is about as small as we can come up with for 100 grains.
Yeah. But having that, people will ask us all the time, like, well, are you going to make a double bevel? And we're like, no, because we don't think they're as good. So why would we make something that works against our design, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Because if we have a double bevel, then it's like we took what we learned and what we designed this thing for, forgot about everything, and said, well, let's sharpen it on both sides and stop the spin.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. All broadheads are double bevel. One of them's at 20 degrees, the other one's at 0 degrees, but they'll cut on both sides. I mean,
they will. Yes. I suppose what I'm saying is though that it's having to
the people that are like, I want a double bevel, I want that in a double. It's like, why? It's gonna be worse. It's not gonna be better. There's no point to do it. It's gonna be probably harder to sharpen than easier. Now you got to maintain an angle on two sides.
Well, and also you're not going to keep an edge as well on a. So I guess your double bevels could theoretically, depending on the angle of the bevel on both sides, but basically the edge retention is a lot of it has to do with how much material there is in that outside 5/1000ths of an inch of the blade. So like in a double bevel, right? If you've got a double bevel that's like this, then the outside portion of that bevel doesn't have very much material there.
Yeah, it's just going to curl.
But when you have a steeper single bevel, then you have more material on that outside 5,000. It's just, it's just physics. The more stuff that there is there, the less likely you are to roll that over or bend it or shatter it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And when I think of like a bleeder blade, I feel like, and I could be completely off, but the way I think about the value that a bleeder blade has is, for me, helping transport blood through the arrow shaft channel and the exit hole specifically. So if you had that single bevel, let's just imagine it goes straight in, like you said. Now that wound can close up, right? And it's kind of hard. Well, if you any other cuts you put into that, through that pizza, like if you cut a pizza in half, it's really easy to put it back together. You cut a pizza into 8 slices. Now that middle part's got a lot of weakness, right? That's kind of hard to keep that center part. And to me, I feel like I don't need bleeder blades to be out there trying to catch heart and lungs if I miss, right? And I think some companies are like, we have a bleeder blade. It's like, no, you have a 4-blade broadhead. Like, that's what that is. I just want a little bit to kind of weaken that center point a little bit, open up that center point a little bit, and help blood get out. My main blades are what's going to, hemorrhage. That's, I need to put the arrow in the right spot so the main blades can cause enough hemorrhage for the animal to die. To me, bleeder blades is all about getting it through the hide and the fat.
Yeah, it's about making a weaker valve that's gonna purge stuff out.
And I only care about it in 2 spots. The in and the out. Like, I don't need it to be out there cutting liver and lung as it goes. Like, exactly. I think some of them get too big, and I'm like, I don't want to trade that much penetration for this adventure. I just want a little bit. Give me like a half inch on either side or 3/8 inch on either side. I don't need 3/4 inch bleeder blades.
And really, I think when you think about bleeder blades, right, the reason people do them, it is compensation for shots that are less accurate or a broadhead that doesn't do as much damage as ours does. So
blood trail.
With blood trail. So you need a blood trail if you're going to have to chase your animal, right? And we're not saying like, I can't look at you and be like, hey, 100% of the time your animal's going to die in front of you, right? But our experience is we haven't had to chase anything.
Well, I think there's 2 things that go on there. I think number one, when you switch to fixed blade broadheads, a high quality fixed blade broadhead, you transfer less energy to the animal, right? And when you shoot a big mechanical and that thing opens up, I mean, it hits hard. Like, that's when you hear it. And that animal feels it, right? I've had a lot of people talk about whitetails, and they're like, hey, when we were shooting fixed blades, we were watching a lot of things die in sight. And as we switched to mechanicals, nothing died in sight. They take off like a bat out of hell because they know they got hit. Right? They got hit by something. And I think the point is that I'm making is, number one, by going to a fixed blade, I think you transfer less energy to the animal. I think everyone understands that. When you go to a high quality, efficient fixed blade, now you're even transferring even less. You're getting a full pass through. They don't really know what happened. They might have got hit. I don't know. I can't really tell. Now they're probably getting an adrenaline dump. So they run 30 yards and they stop and look back and see what happened and tip over. And I think that you just find that happening more often than when you shoot them with a big expandable and they know they got hit. That arrow's still in them. They can feel it. They're, it's running with them. And all of a sudden they don't stop. And that's when you're blood trailing, perfect shots, you're trailing deer for 100, 200 yards. And elk are so darn tough, you don't want them to run that fast.
No, you don't. Yeah. Well, I've had that conversation with a lot of pro techs and stuff all around the country, and ones that, most of them have gone back to solid construction fixed blade broadheads.
Yeah.
And for that exact reason, because if when you pass through and that animal doesn't really know what happened, they don't get stressed out. They just kind of go like, oh, that was weird. What happened? And they take a few steps, whatever it is, however far they go, and then they kind of pile up because they're bleeding internally from the broadhead passing through.
Yeah. So,
but because they're not stressed, also you get better tasting meat. You don't have an adrenaline dump that's happening through the entire animal.
Yeah.
Because like you nail an elk with a mechanical, right? And even if you punch that thing in the heart, it can run 300 yards. In a few seconds.
Well, I don't know if you saw the podcast we just did with Primal Pursuit. But JD was a guide, and he said, we shot a bull in camp one year that had an arrow through one lung, and it was there for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Like
that's wild.
that
Yeah,
single
they're
lung shot did
incredibly
not
tough
kill the
animals.
elk at all. A lot of people used to say like they can run a mile on a single elk. That thing ran 3 years on a single lung.
Yeah, they can survive forever with one
Yeah.
lung.
Yeah,
They're probably
no,
not running as fast as the other elk, but
I think that's a big deal with the single bevel, fixed blade to start with, and then single bevel, and then every edge you can add on top of that, I think just helps that whole conversation. Like it's like a paper cut, right? You get a paper cut, you sting, you jump, you look at it, and then you can't even feel it after that, right? I think that's what kind of happens when you think about it. Like you hit your finger with a hammer, you can feel that forever. Like that's not going away. And I think the more efficient that broadhead is, the less energy you transfer, the more it's like that paper cut where there's an initial jolt, they run across the food plot, and they're like, what just happened? And then they tip over because they lost all their blood pressure. And that's what I'm hoping for. I don't want any energy transfer in an arrow. I want all of it with the bullet. I mean, that's how they kill, is energy transfer. With an arrow, it's like, I don't want any. Like, can we just transfer 1 foot-pound of energy to do the job and then punch through and bury my arrow? I don't need it back at that point. Bury it in the ground. But that's what I'm hoping for. And that's why I've kind of switched. And I've been on the fence. It's like, well, I had a bad experience with that whitetail with the fixed blade that I was using. So then I went back to mechanicals and I had a good experience. And now I'm like, but then I've had bad experiences with mechanicals too. So it kind of just takes my temperature because I haven't found the right one yet. And I think that's what I'm really excited to try out, the Toulou Broadhead on whitetails this year and see what happens.
We'll get it to you.
Yeah. Well,
test it out for
depending on what the Postal Service, if the Postal Service comes through for us, I might be able to bring them to Nebraska on Friday.
Oh, yeah. Nice. All right. Friday.
Yeah, we're leaving first hunt this Friday.
What are you hunting?
Whitetails in Nebraska. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be with the XOP team. So we're testing out some products, XOP saddles and tree stands.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, no, it'll be fun. Cool. It'll be either way. If not Nebraska, I'll come home and they'll be here and I'll be hunting in my backyard. So
Yeah.
we'll get some experience with them for sure.
We'll get them to you.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm really excited. I'm excited for the 200 grains for elk. I'm excited to see what you come up with for bleeder blades in the future. Really excited to do this. This is the first broadhead company we've had on, and I've always been thinking like we should get a broadhead company on. I've reached out to some people, but yeah, this is the first one that's come through, so I'm kind of excited.
Well, we appreciate you having us.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on. We'll do a podcast. We should get you on the Western Rookie podcast after you guys go out west again.
Okay.
And
all right,
hear that story and dropping bulls.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys for being here, Jake and Trevor, and thank you for listening.